when it comes to SWOT analysis kind of thing, in Kerala, the person is all about, he is obsessed with the Nayar Taravadu, the middle class and the middle caste. His characters are mostly are middle caste or middle class. That's a new, line of criticism of his films. Do you think that that aspect comes for a non-Malayali? Does it count at all?
You have to remember that even Chatterjee Ray faced a similar criticism because, from leftist film critics who said, he's like only interested in, the middle class and, relatively well-off people. I mean, he obviously made films like Ashwini Sanket and all, which are also about, but and all, Patek Pachali was about a poverty-ridden family in a village. But he faced that. So I think, a filmmaker will, or any storyteller should stick to what he or she understands, what he or she has grown up surrounded by. I mean, why would Adoor compete with someone who's going into the interiors of Kerala and making a film, making an uncompromising? He will stick to what he believes in, what he understands, and that's why he makes films that are so timeless. I mean, a lot of these other new films that have come out of Kerala, they might get critical acclaim, but I'm not sure. I mean, again, I might be wrong, and I'll be happy to be proven wrong. 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, they might not survive. Yeah. But you watch Swayamvaram even today. I mean, it tells me something about the country, the time, the place. So, I mean, a filmmaker a storyteller who's really, I mean, what I was.
Okay, now you said, I'll just remind you, a reminder question, which is that you talk about Satyajit Ray, a parallel. There was also criticism that he is obsessed with middle class, and now the new addition is middle caste also. So, how do you see this kind of criticism?
I mean, this is, I think, completely unfair because it's a filmmaker's prerogative, a storyteller's prerogative to focus on what he is. He understands fully. I mean, why would he go into spaces which you have to sort of do research in, because that is not what Adoor's filmmaking is about. Adoor's filmmaking is very personal in the sense that he will only tell a story that interests him, and he will set his film in a space that interests him. I mean, as I was saying, the Satyajit Ray also faced similar criticism, from some critics. I mean, that he was, interested only in a certain milieu. But I mean, that is absolutely, it doesn't make sense to, hold a filmmaker, responsible for choosing certain subjects or certain milieus to make films about. And Adoor's films, I mean, Swayamvaram and Mukhamukham and Elipatra, I mean, they are films that so many years down the line, they're still relevant. I mean, which only proves that, what he did was right. I mean, he wasn't, if these films were not, they were only about a certain class of people and no one else was interested in what he was saying, then these films wouldn't have survived. I mean, so today, of course, like Kerala has, not just Kerala, maybe many other states also have these films that people sort of set in interior parts of the state and talk about issues that are what we would describe as subaltern issues. I mean, which is absolutely fair from the point of view of these filmmakers. But my point is, will these films survive as long as Adoor's films have? I mean, will people be talking about today's successful films 50 years down the line with the same enthusiasm and with the same level of relatability? I mean, there's with Adoor's films, I mean, it doesn't matter which year the film was made. I mean, today you can still discuss the politics of his films, the psychology of his films, the personal journeys of his characters, and those are absolutely, I mean, that's what all great stories and all great art is about. I mean, they survive. We will come and go, but that art will.
Yeah, Mr. Babu, coming to that, both of us, I don't know whether sight and sound decadal assessment of films are going on. This time I was also following. In fact,
the 10 greatest films of all time.
So, few films comes to your mind. For me, Elipathamayam was one of them. Along with Last Strada, Vaida's After Image, Ray's Charulata, That's Subramanian. So for me, this is as timeless as Charulata is, or Last Rada is, or a nostalgia of Tarkovsky is, because it's our milieu, our life, our society, and how he has placed Elipathayan character in that. Or is it the fringe things like he's a Nair, Taravadu, he's middle caste, he's a feudal lord? Does that count in the ultimate analysis of looking at a film?
Well, yeah. So your question is, which is the favorite out of the?
No. This aspect of criticism of the film, that middle caste, and he's obsessed with them. That aspect of it. The critics say that Adoor's films is all about middle caste and middle class. He doesn't look at lower caste. He doesn't look at beyond his milieu. So this kind of thing, which Saibal says, Satyajit Ray also went through that. But what you have to look at for is it just that? That's only the paraphernalia of the film. The film itself is the artist's vision, the creativity, the craft, all of it. Can we ignore it and concentrate on such things of being a middle class, the milieu is of his own milieu? So how important that is to look at a film of quality, or film which stands the test of time.
Yes. Well, Adoor is, as we know well, he's an extremely uncompromising filmmaker. And in one of the interviews which you had with him, I've heard him saying that, it takes a long time to decide on the subject. I mean, he thinks of a subject and the next day he says no, and, he rejects whatever ideas come to his mind. And only when he's really convinced, he will take up the subject and make a film based on it. Such an uncompromising filmmaker, he wants to be very sure of, what he's making, and he can only draw on, the milieu, he's familiar with, and, the cultural landscape of Kerala, and, he draws from his roots, and, from his childhood, and, the way he has grown up, and the city. And so he can only draw from his experience. But ultimately, what he makes is important because it is, something universal. Okay. So on the one hand, the filmmaker like, Adoor, restricting himself perhaps to something which he's very familiar with, but he makes a universal statement which is timeless and which is interesting for us. So I don't think that argument is valid.
Saibal, when it comes to not only Adoor's films, there is this cultural context, which they say for Hrithik, to understand Hrithik's films, you need to know Bangla culture better than maybe for outsiders. Like many people say that for outsiders, non-Bengalis, it's very difficult, or sometimes they miss the nuances because he puts his films, his characters in the cultural context so much. Some other things, like I wrote somewhere saying that Meghta Ke Tare, when the leading lady leaves the house, there's a song. And I read somewhere it is the song which it is sung when Durga idol is taken out. Somebody said no, not true. So that kind of motive, how important is the cultural context for filmmakers like Hrithik, Satyajit Ray, and Adoor?
See, you have to understand. Adoor, Hrithik Ghatak's films are all about displacement, and displacement is a phenomenon that anybody can understand. Even if you're not from Bengal and you don't understand what Bengal has faced in the last, say, 100 years, you would still be able to understand the condition of a person who's been uprooted, a family that has been uprooted and forced to live in, conditions that are not that great, and as a result of which they face all the challenges that they face. So now a great film, a great story, a Charles Dickens, David Copperfield and Oliver Twist are stories set in a particular time in London, but they're still read by people, and you can still relate to those emotions and the social, dynamics that are at play there. So that is what is true of Adoor Gopalakrishnan's films. I mean, Mukha Mukham, for instance, is in a way, very personal film because he's drawn from his own experiences. But this whole idea of a man trapped, because he hasn't really been able to break free from, the past. That is a thing that everybody in the world can understand, and that is also, you have to understand that Adoor's films, they also deal with rituals, but those rituals never, rituals that are very, very, rooted in Kerala, but they never overshadow the film. They're there. They help you understand the space and the milieu, but they do not overshadow the power of the story. So that is, and that is why his films are universal. I mean, they are specific, culture specific, and yet universal, which is what we also say about Satyajit Ray. I mean, like a Charulata or a Paset Pachali, they might be very rooted in Bengal, and Charulata in a particular period, in Bengal. But still, those are stories that people around the world can relate to because they deal with the human condition, the condition of a woman in a traditional conservative home. So these are things that everybody can understand. So that is, I think, true of Adoor as well. I mean, any story of his you take, it's a story that can travel. I mean, and these stories have traveled to corners of the world because they are universal stories.
Mr. Babu, the question of local and universal in film.
Yes.
Like most of the filmmakers, great filmmakers, take a subject very local.
Yes.
I'm seeing Fellini's it's very local, but it touches you after a point. Seeing from India, an Italian film touches you, and that in a way it's the local and the universal appeal of a film. So do you think the Indian filmmakers of great standing like Adoor, Ray, or even Girish, for that matter, Girish Kasaravalli from Bangalore,
Yes.
with this local and universal, how do you think they have handled that one?
That's an interesting question because even if you look at some like Tarkovsky, well, there are many things which are specific to Russia, which we won't understand at all. But the films, they appeal to us and we are able to appreciate it. And they are, really timeless classics. So, in a similar way, we can find that even with a filmmaker like Adoor, he's definitely drawing from his culture, and well, we may not know the Malayalam language at all, and the way they eat, and their food habit, everything. But this is where the filmmaker is so talented that he's able to one level he can give us the details, which some of which only local Keralites may be able to respond to. But there is so much for people from other states or from other countries. They can definitely relate to most of the film, if not some specific details. But what is interesting here, this is where I'm saying that Adoor has been very successful in pushing us to the deeper meaning. So it's not just the surface level meaning, the superficial meaning. Most films, like I said, what you see is what you get, and there's nothing more than that. Whereas in the case of Adoor, there is always the other meaning, the higher level meaning, and he has been very skillful in pushing us towards that. And that's where I think lies his achievement.
Okay, Saibal, let's come to our last.
Sure.
Out of the 6 films, one always can ask. I think the 6th film is I'll say is creative graphic grown from zero, or not zero. I'll say from it's an upward curve. From Swayamvaram to Multilocal. And I heard myself was shocked when Thomas Alia, when last he came to India, there was a press conference at PIB in Delhi. I asked him, have you seen good films in India? I don't know whether you were there. He said, he looked at, recollected and said, I saw one, Elipathium. That's what he said. I still remember. I told Radu, he was also very shocked. He told me that that film is somehow they're getting a lot of traction in South America because they feel that the feudal past, there are people like the Elipathan character, caught in the past, not able to come out. Their plight, they can relate. So my question is, having said, of course, Elipathan got the BFI award. So what, out of the 6 films, you will categorize as 1, 2, 3, whichever way you want to do it.
No, I won't rank the films because they are all great films. But personally, I relate to Multilocal a great deal because it's one of his rare films where the tone is positive. I mean, it's like his other films are about individuals who are weighed down by social changes and political pressures and family dynamics going wrong. Multilocal, despite the fact that it's set within a jail and a writer who's, as is there, it explores the power of the mind and the heart to leap beyond restrictions and this whole, the voice that, sort of arouses a sort of romantic feeling. It's almost like, I mean, it would be the wrong word to use in the context of Adoor. It's almost a feel-good film. So that's the film that I particularly love because, I mean, obviously the first impulse would be to name Ali Patayam because highest, greatest achievement in terms of cinema. But Multilocal is also an amazing film, and also because of the performance, the lead performance, and what it says about freedom. As you said, it's an exploration, an examination of what freedom means, and is freedom just being physically allowed to move around, or can freedom also be of the mind? I mean, and this somehow really excites me because that's what this film talks about. I mean, it's the freedom of the mind. I mean, is what it celebrates, and a rare film where it's based on a writer's work, but it's more, I mean, less about the work and more about the writer himself. I mean, Adoor is able to make that transition leap from just the book, which is there, part of the story, but is also about the writer, and beyond that is also about a human being who's creative, who has ideas, who's able to convince people that there's more to him than just the chains that he's in.
In fact, Adoor said that when he wrote the script, or when he invited the writer to see the film, he asked me how did you end the film with the roses with the roses outside the jail. He didn't say what he did. He because if that that ends as a romantic film, he wanted to end it as a statement on the freedom itself. So he ended the question anyway, what kind of freedom are we going? So that kind of thing. But unlike though Bashir was a senior writer, he didn't quarrel with it, and he enjoyed the film. And his joke, he's a very jovial fellow. He said, my only doubt is when I go back, he said his wife may want me to be looking like Mammootty. So that was a joke the writer told Adoor. So that's the way he concluded. Babu, coming to that, he said, Saibal said, Multilocal is personal story. I'm sure you wrote extensively on Anandaram. Maybe that could be. So what's your take on that, looking at the 6?
Yeah, that is wonderful to, hear from Saibal, why he likes Madrigal. A very good description of the film, I thought. And, well, as a film lover, I like all the films of, all the 6 films which we are discussing now. But if I have to, pick up one film at gunpoint, then I may have to say Anantaram. Because if you go by complexity and ambiguity as the yardstick, I thought Anantaram really scores big on both. And another thing is that, it ushered in modernity in Indian cinema in a big way, which is very, very important, I thought. Adoor came up with, an innovation in film form. That's very hard to do. I mean, it's a great achievement in the Indian cinema that a film like Anantaram, there is a wonderful innovation in film form, which is unique. So it depicts a dual human personality, using that innovative film form. I would say that it's a monumental work in Indian cinema, and it has its place in world cinema also.
I always argue with Adoor that your best film is Elipathan, because I take the help of Thomas Elia in this. And of course, as Mr. Babu said, I love Anantaram. And Multilocal is like a Multilocal is also very close because of the concept of freedom, which is this thing, and Bashir, because these three films, I think, are great films in their its own way. Of course, each of us have our personality approaches to films, and we choose our films accordingly. So, but Adoor gives us a choice. That's his, I think, beauty of his film. He gives us a choice as an author filmmaker, and he asks us to look at ourselves. Like Saibal is talking about freedom, the concept of freedom. We're talking about the film form itself, and I am intrigued by the intertwining of various things in Elipatayam, because the character, the rat, the house, colors. It's a unique combination of things which he has done, and that's his third film. And he told me also in the interview that he was in a very deep pain after the cooperative fell through because of various issues. But then he got a producer. It's all part of the history now. But thank you for this wonderful discussion. I'm sure people who love good films and people who are keen to know what Adoor, the way he makes the films, why he's great filmmaker. It'll be helpful for them to understand, and when we celebrate 50 years of Swayamvaram and Adoor's creativity. Thank you, Mr. Babu. Thank you, Saibal.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Many congratulations to you, Mr. Cherian, for taking the initiative of celebrating this 50th anniversary of Adoor's Swayamvaram. And in the series of video interviews you have conducted, with the master on his films, you made very perceptive remarks. I thought useful to listen to your pertinent questions and very insightful responses from Adoor. And I also thank you for this discussion we had with you and Ms. Saibal Chatterjee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Babu Subramanian.
Yeah. For me, it is like I grew up with Chittralekha Film Society as a college student. So I have a comfort level with Adoor. He has a comfort level with me, because a lot of them, what you call mentored us. Like Chittralekha, when Adoor comes in with his wife for a film, which means that the film is, Adoor wants to see that film. He should have seen it somewhere else, but he wants to see it again. I remember when Mitsubichi's films came, Adoor and his wife, they were there all through for a Bergman package. So we know that it's a great film because Adoor is there to watch with us. So that's the kind of things, I'll say, I was telling in the inaugural of the video that he set the standard of aesthetics of films for us by his writing, by his presence, by his films. That's why I thought we must celebrate his 50 years, not because as a fan or something, but he is instrumental in the growth of that portion in Kerala. And I'm sure across India, he carries the light of, which ray lit in Bengal and India for us, and the rest of them carried, and Adoor is still carrying it. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.